Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gambles, and welcome back to the full card breakdown. This time for UFC Vegas 97, we are back at the Apex for a phenomenal fight card headlined by Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady. It is a fun one, 13 fights on tap. I'm excited to dive in. We had a week off last time. You know what that means? Not only do we have a little break, time to regather our thoughts, but also we are 1 week closer to UFC Noche. A lot of phenomenal fights coming up to end this 2024 calendar year, and I am looking forward to it. And I enjoyed my time off. We hit the books. We kicked our feet up. It was a good break, and I feel ready and energized to go back out there and not only enjoy some fights, but hopefully make some money on both a betting and DraftKings perspective. As always, we're going to break down this card bottom to top, make our way all the way up to that main event, talk both DraftKings, talk both betting. If you guys cannot tell, I am not in my usual setup. I'm back home. You know, right where the Plays and Fades YouTube channel started. I also can't find a hat, so you guys are getting a brand new version of me, pretty much. It might not even be Gordo Gambles anymore. It might be an alter ego this week, but an alter ego that's hungry to go out there and win, hungry to go out there and give you guys my thoughts on the fights, and hopefully go out there and make some money. Before we get into it, please like button down below, subscribe to the channel, show some love, check out CoolBet, check out Established Run for my in-depth DraftKings breakdowns, and with all out of the way, let's dive in. We get the fight night started with the 9-2 Ziggy Montes Ramaskas versus the 8-1 Nathan Fletcher, a fight that was supposed to happen 2 weeks ago. I did not get the chance to break it down, so I'm kind of happy to talk about it here because I did watch the Ultimate Fight of the season. I did honestly enjoy it, especially that Ramaska fight, especially Ramaska's first fight. I mean, that was an insane Ultimate Fighter fight, insane fight in general. I do recommend you guys go watch that one, but it showed who he really is. Ramaska's a madman. He'll go out there, he'll swing with fight-ending intention. He doesn't have the most technicality, but he will brawl, he will take a shot, and he will look to destroy his opponents. I mean, he really throws all technicality out the window and just throws an insane pace, insane volume, can scramble pretty well. A guy who just fights at a very, very high pace. Fletcher's a bit different. Fletcher's more calm. He's more methodical. He thinks through a lot of these spots here, and I think that makes for a pretty fun fight. You have the madman Ramaska wants to go there, take your head off, versus the guy in Fletcher who can slow the fight down, who can utilize the wrestling, who I think is the better technical fighter of the two. Makes for a pretty fun fight overall. I do think Ramaska is live over this fight's on the feet because he can overwhelm Fletcher. He is going to be 4 inches taller than Fletcher. We just saw Fletcher go out there, be out-muscled, out-scrambled by a guy awfully in his fight. But I think at the end of the day, I am going to side with Fletcher here. I think if it's an entertaining fight, more than not, it's Ramaska winning. But I do think Fletcher's able to slow it down. I do think he has the technicality to compete on the feet with Ramaska, but also the grappling, the ability to wrestle and hold Ramaska down. We saw in the regional scene he can be held down, and I do think that is Fletcher's path to victory. I do think he's able to get it done that way. DraftKings-wise, although it kind of does scare me this fight was canceled last minute last week, I still like this one. I think, like I said, if Ramaska wins, it's going to be due to high volume, high pace, high pressure at 7.9K. His style just creates DraftKings points. Where on the flip side of things, Fletcher's a guy at 8.3, who if he wins, I often believe it's due to control time, wrestling, and he does have one of the best takedown upsides on the slate. 8.3K, 7.9K, I will have some ownership of them both, but I do lean towards the Fletcher side, so I will have more of him due to his wrestling upside. Next up, we have the 11-3 Andrade Petroski versus the 7-3 Dylan Budka. I think it's another fun fight here. This one is more wrestling-oriented. Two guys who want to go out there, take down their opponents, look to grind on them. Budka is the more like, I'm going to wear you down the stretch. Maybe not the most technical takedowns, not much of a jiu-jitsu threat, but a guy who will push a very hectic pace, look to break you with takedowns, and he has done that in order to make his way to the UFC. Petroski is that more technical side of things. He does have a good blast double. He utilizes his physicality very well, and he is able to muscle people down to the ground. On the mat, I do think he is the much better jiu-jitsu practitioner. What he has struggled with has been that cardio and pace that Budka's going to bring, and often on the feet, he's able to potentially lose exchanges that way. I just don't think Budka really offers too much on the feet. Actually, I think on the feet, Petroski, for once, might be the better technical striker, which is something you never really say. So, I think at the end of the day, Budka's a guy who only rates out as a pressure grappler. Not the most technique, not the most jiu-jitsu threat, but if he is still alive and going around 3, even if he has energy to push through, he'll often win moments that way. However, I think until then, I have to side with Petroski. More physicality, better technique in general, and more of a jiu-jitsu threat, as well as having the potential to win minutes on the feet. I think it's Petroski's fight to lose. I think he's the better overall fighter, able to implement multiple aspects of his game, and I do think he's able to utilize his physicality and strength to get the win here. Wide price tag, I don't often like trusting Petroski at chalk, but a guy who I do think gets it done more times than not. DraftKings-wise, it's an interesting one because 9.3K, I do think Petroski wins more times than not. He was able to put up back-to-back-to-back 100-plus points performances in the first 3 fights, but has kind of slowed down from a draft perspective. I think he's very boomer bust. Of course, he has that wrestling upside. Of course, he has the finishing upside of a guy like Budka, but a guy who we have seen slow down, potentially use his striking more, just be a really good control grappler to the point where he doesn't score very well. Had all this control time, almost 13 minutes of control time in his last fight, only landed 30 strikes, doesn't really score well in DraftKings. He is extremely boomer bust, and I kind of prefer to go elsewhere, but his floor is so high this week that I will have some ownership of him. Budka is an interesting one for me. He could be a punt play this week that you could look to go to, but I think he's going to be largely mitigated early on. I think his win condition is later success, and I don't see him getting a finish too often. So for that reason, kind of staying away from him. I am picking Petroski, but tentative to play him on DraftKings. Next up, 8-1 Jacqueline Amorim versus the 11-5 Vanessa Demopoulous. A really clash of styles here. You have a girl in Demopoulous who has done pretty well inside the UFC, able to rattle off those wins. Doesn't have the most technique, does not have the most physicality, but she is a psychopath, for lack of a better term. She will push forward, she will throw with reckless abandon, a ton of volume, ton of damage will be implemented, and a really solid ground game, but just not the physicality to get there, not the most technique in the feet, was willing to eat punches with her face all the time, and is pretty much a walking punching bag. But she has utilized that forward pressure and ability to win minutes that way. Good durability, good cardio, and good forward pressure. Amorim's a bit of different. She is a specialist. On the ground, she is a tank. She's a monster. She is so good on the mat. Her downfall has been her cardio and her ability to be extended down the stretch. She is someone who is a multi-time champion of jiu-jitsu, has shown that in her performances, and has looked really good from top position, has fought lower level competition, but truthfully, it has shown that when she's down on the mat, she is a dominant fighter. She's threatening people from all positions, and that overall skill set is why she's such a large favorite in the spot here. I'm really struggling with this one. I think gun to my head, I pick Amorim. I think she's able to get takedowns on Demopoulous. Demopoulous is taken down extremely easy because she's willing to pay from guard, and I think that Demopoulous can be stuck there. But I think that at minus 350, Demopoulous probably has the edge in the striking, being so aggressive, being willing to eat all the shots and push forward, and has won optics that way from her back as well. And I think that she is just someone who you don't really want to go against as a plus 250 underdog, because she will fight for your money, she will go forward, and she will utilize her reckless abandon, her pressure, and look to win fights that way. Amorim, I think, is the far more superior skilled fighter. I think she's able to win from top control, potentially threaten submissions as well, but Demopoulous has been pretty durable on the mat, is able to throw volume her own way, so I think it's a fight I don't really want to get too involved in. At the end of the day, I think Amorim's able to win the minutes with takedown control and potentially threaten dominant positions, but as the fight goes on, it's the volume, it's the pace, it's the forward pressure of Demopoulous that causes Amorim problems, and I do think this line could look a lot closer than it entails right now. Picking Amorim, but not really as bullish enough to play the minus 350 price tag. DraftKings wise, interesting because Amorim 9.1K. She's put up 120 points before. She has a really solid grappling path to victory here. I think she can take down Demopoulous at will. I think she is a solid GBP option at 9.1K, but I don't mind Demopoulous. 7.1K. She has rattled off a lot of wins before here in the UFC. Maybe not scoring the best, but when you're pushing such a forward heavy pace, when you have shown the durability to survive in there, I think in a win at 7.1K, she could go out there and look to break this late a little bit. She is so volume and damage oriented that I do think that she could score well as underdog at 7.1K. And I do think she win more than the line entails. She is an intriguing underdog, but as a whole, this is a fight I do want to target. I'm picking Amorim, but not too confident compared to the line here. Next up, 10-2, Gabriel Santos, 25-4, Yi Za. Fun fight, larger favorite here in Santos, a guy who has shown to be pretty well-rounded. He has the ability to go out there and strike on the feet, is a very technical striker, is a good jiu-jitsu practitioner as well. He utilizes physicality very well. Only 27 years old, I do think he's still making improvements, and he has fought a really good level of competition in the UFC so far. Yi Za's a bit different. He's a pure wrestler. He landed 5 takedowns in his UFC debut, ended up losing that fight, but still scoring 52 points on DraftKings. He's a guy who just prioritizes that control. He wants to take you down, he wants to keep you there. It's not going to threaten much offensively with jiu-jitsu or ground and pound. It isn't going to offer too much in the feet either. He's just going to shoot takedowns early and often. And although I think that has credence to make him maybe a bit more live towards his price tag here, is not a guy who I think wins fights too often, because people have shown they don't really gauge control too often. It's now damage that's winning fights. And in this spot here, I think not only is Santos going to be the more dangerous striker, but the more dangerous pure jiu-jitsu practitioner. I think Izal can land takedowns, I think he can hold him there, but I don't think he has enough damage from top position to go out there and threaten to win this fight. And for that reason, I think Santos has more ways of getting it done, and he's able to win the minutes on the feet, able to potentially win scrambles on the mat as well, and utilize that physicality to keep it upright. I think Izal is pretty one-dimensional with that wrestling, so Santos taking that away should lead him to the win. I am picking Santos in this matchup. DraftKings-wise, I'm not really getting to Santos that much. I don't think he's going to be the aggressor in the takedowns. I don't know how often he gets a finish, so at 8.8K, I'm tentative to play him. 7.4 for Yiza is kind of tempting, though, because he is somebody who will shoot takedowns at a high pace. Like I mentioned, 53 points in a loss last time. I think if he wins this fight, it's very heavy grappling-oriented, and I do think it could come with a pretty nice salary and a pretty nice FD score in doing so. So I think he's a very live underdog this week. I don't think he wins this fight, so I'm not playing him too often, but I'm looking to get different. I'm looking to spread around my exposure. He is someone I'm getting to who he does have a lot of wrestling upside. However, with that being said, give me Santos on the money line. Next up, 9-1 Andre Lima versus the 8-1 Felipe Santos. Everybody knows Lima as the guy who was bit in a cage, a guy who won a fight by biting disqualification, and an undefeated prospect at that. He's a very fun fighter to go out there and watch. He has a very good volume, technical, counter-striking ability, and someone who is willing to play from the outside and win the striking exchanges. He's still young, very dynamic, and he has shown decent takedown defense in order to keep it on the feet to utilize that striking. Felipe Santos is a bit different. He's more of that madman. He will push forward. He will look to break opponents. He has shown ability to wrestle, throw good volume, and throw with fight ending intention. That fight against Manel Kopp was absolutely beautiful to watch, and he showed a very good account for himself. He showed that he can go out there, push a very heavy pace, and just throw down. And I think in this spot here, although Andre Lima is going to be the more technical striker of the two, Dos Santos is definitely able to cause problems because he can eat a shot, he can go forward, he can throw with fight intention of his shots his own right, but also land a ton of volume, look to sway the judges that way, and potentially even mix in takedown threats. We saw Lima, he was losing his fight to Severino before he got bit, and I do think Dos Santos can replicate a few spots here to have him have success. I do think Dos Santos is one of my favorite underdogs in the slate, and I think I'm actually picking him outright. He's only 23 years old, fighting out of a good gym. I think he mixes in takedowns. I think he throws more volume. I think he starts faster here, and I do think he's got the durability to stay within his fight for a long time. I like the guy. I think it's going to be a very fun fight. DraftKings-wise, though, he's the only side I want. Even though Lima has a good chance to win this fight, I think it's very close. 8.5K, he's never been the best DraftKings scorer. He doesn't throw the most volume. He doesn't have any grappling success. He hasn't even been the biggest finisher, so he is someone who doesn't score that well. He doesn't put up the DraftKings points to do so. Whereas Dos Santos will throw volume, will shoot takedowns. And although he only scored 51 points last time, has a better matchup to go out there and score very well. I think he's one of my favorite underdogs this week to pick to win outright. So for that reason, I will have some ownership of him. 7.7K, I like him a lot more than his counterpart up top in Lima. So give me Dos Santos to win. Give me him on DraftKings. Should be a fun fight. I just think the young guy here is making improvements, has more ways of getting it done. And then next up, 6-1, Isaac Dulgarian, 8-2, Brandon Marotte. I'm not even talking about this one. This is a setup fight. Largest favorite in UFC history. Marotte has been steamrolled before in the UFC. And Dulgarian, the Midwest Choppa, is a highly touted prospect who people want to see succeed. He's a phenomenal forward pressure ground game, and I do think goes out there, blitzes Marotte, and finishes him early. I think it's a huge skill gap. Dulgarian is, I think, the real deal, and Marotte has shown durability issues. I think Dulgarian's able to just steamroll here, and I think that although the price tag is wide, I mean, it's the biggest favorite ever, the guy should win. If he loses here, it should be a huge upset. It's a setup fight for Dulgarian to succeed, and I do think he's able to go out there and do so. The question is just, can you play him at 9.9K on DraftKings, the biggest favorite of all time? So he was able to go out there and score 121 in almost a perfect performance last time, or 2 fights ago, against Marshall. But does that even make the optimal lineup at 9.9K? He is so expensive this week on a pretty high-scoring slate that it's so hard to get to him. I think he could just be squeezed out of the optimal lineup due to his salary, and it's dangerous to go out there and play him. Yes, he wins this fight at a high clip. Yes, in cash, he's going to go out there and at least score 110 points. But is 110 enough? What do you need for him to be worth it this week? And I think with the lack of underdogs and with the upside we see of other fighters in this range, I won't be getting him to Dulgarian as much as I want to. I think he has quick win bonus upside, and then he could very well go up to score 115 points, but that may not be enough. The salary might be too much. In cash, I'm playing him. In GBP, I might sprinkle him in a bit, but I think more times than not, he's squeezed out of the lineup due to salary. I'm going to get to him. Clear setup fight, though. Dulgarian gets it done. I think he steers on him early. I just don't know how much I can get into that 9.9K price tag. On to the 6-fight main card here. We have the 25-5 Rongzhu versus the 14-6 Chris Padilla. Interesting fight here. Taco Chris Padilla is a guy who burst onto the scene, pulled off a really nice upset submission win in his last victory, and now is facing another guy here in Rongzhu and is another large underdog. And you know what? You like to throw some interest in him, a guy who has a solid submission game, who has pulled off the upset before, but especially facing a guy in Rongzhu who has been submitted multiple times, I think it lines up for a decent underdog spot. But at the end of the day, I'm picking Rongzhu here. I think Padilla, although he had his moment, was still such a big underdog for a reason last time. Sorry, a guy who can be hit, who can be knocked out, who can be controlled in the mat. And although he's a very good opportunistic grappler, I think he's limited to that. Rongzhu, although he's been submitted, is working in that grappling game, and on the feet, I think is the far superior striker. He's got good movement, got good one and out ability, and got good power to go out there and finish fights. At 24 years old, he's still making improvements, and I do like this guy to win this fight here. I do think he has a way better strike and more passing than get done, and has worked on that ground game to survive the blitz from Padilla. I think more times than not, Rongzhu is able to get this win, and often coming with that power early on. Because of that, I have some interest of him. 8.9K. He's put up 146 points before. I think that merits some credit here, but a guy who I do think has a clear striking advantage, a clear power advantage, and should be able to threaten finishes here against a guy in Padilla who is hittable, who is a bit slower. And I do think he has some QP upside. We've seen him do that before. However, I do not want to completely be 100% to him. I think there are ways he does bust, whether it be him avoiding the wrestling, whether it be he being a lower pace and looking to finally get his footing inside the UFC. I think there are ways that play does bust. However, 7.3K, I don't mind Padilla. I think his path to victory is finish-oriented. I don't think he gets it too often, so I won't be getting to him, but a little sprinkled due to that upside, due to the fact that we have seen him go out there score 112 before as a big underdog. And I do think his path to victory is limited to grappling success and potentially a flukier finish. More times than not, Rongzhu does get it done. I think he's the more violent finisher, the more violent striker, and a guy who's making these improvements at 24 years old. I do think he's set up to have a win here. And then here it is, 9-2 Trevor Peek, 7-1 Yanal Ashmouz. It's a Trevor Peek fight. I love Trevor Peek. I was able to take a picture with him before. Meet the guy. Nice dude. And a very entertaining fighter, let's put it that way. He throws all technicality aside, goes out there and just brawls. He can be taken down, he can be hit, but he just pushes through all damage, throws tomahawks, and just looks to melt opponents, looks to break them with his power. You know, Ashmouz in front of him, maybe the more technical fighter of the two, has power in his own right. He saw that in his UFC debut, was able to get that knockout, and has wrestling, which we did see in the regional scene, but a guy who is more methodical, is a bit slower that way, and a guy who, although he's able to willing to engage in brawls, has more technicality to go out there in decisions. Because Trevor Peek, although he's gone to decision his last three, is not a decision fighter. He's a powerful guy, a guy who just thrives with those knockouts, is not going to win point fighting anytime. He wants to go out there and just maul his opponents, and he has the power to do so, maybe not the technique, but he will just throw balls to the wall, fight with a reckless abandon, and look to win the fights. Fun to watch. Just can it pull off here? I do not rate Ashmouz that highly. I have bet on him a couple times underdog, and I have had some success doing so, but is still a guy with flaws, is still a guy who can be hit, still a guy who can be backed up, and although he has shown good durability and the ability to wrestle, I don't know. I'm getting a weird feeling. I think it's a true 50-50 fight, genuinely, but I love the pace of Peek. I think Ashmouz is a guy who is breakable. I think Peek is a guy who does throw with power and will not stop going forward, and I think that could crumble a guy like Ashmouz here. With the durability Peek has seen, with the ability for him to push forward, with solid cardio, I just think it's a guy I don't really want to step in front of at this time. I think he has more ways he's going to get done. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm picking Trevor Peek. I'm cheering for the guy. I think he's able to push a pace that Ashmouz cannot stand and go out there, look to break him, has the power to do so. I'm cheering for him. Should be a fun fight regardless. Now, we're pretty much getting plus money on a under and a Peek fight, so I might look to play that too, but DraftKings-wise, middle of the slate, both these guys are phenomenal options. Peek scored 130 in his debut. That shows his style, that shows his upside, that shows his power, and Ashmouz is a guy who has lost before, so 8.2K Peek is a high ceiling GPP play for sure. A bit risky because, he lacks technicality, can be stuck on his back, but a guy who will fight for your money. Ashmouz also has power. Peek is there to be hit. Ashmouz does have more wrestling too, so he could potentially go out there and hold down Peek the same way Charlie Campbell did. I think both these guys are very, very live. I do not fault you for playing some 8K in all Ashmouz, especially against a guy with a lack of defensive ability like Peek. But I'm going to side with Peek. I'm going to cheer for him here. A fun fight to go out there and back, and I do hope he gets that knockout. 8.2K, 8K. I like both sides. Slightly leaning towards Peek, though, due to his mentality, his aggression, and his ability to potentially break opponents here. Should be a great fight. And the short notice replacement, 16-6-1, Cody Durden versus the 16-8 Matt Schnell. Happy Durden was able to save this fight. I love me a Matt Danger Schnell fight, but an interesting one now, a very different dynamic. Matt Schnell is a guy who is able to fight through adversity, has a ton of durability issues, can be choked out, can be knocked out, as you saw last time against Ursag, but a guy who will fight for your money, who will push a heavy pace, who is a really good striker when he's not out cold, putting it a bit disrespectfully, but a guy who if he's able to keep his wits about him, is a very, very technical, solid, aggressive fighter. Cody Durden's a pure wrestler. Let's put it that way. He's got solid boxing. He is working on it, but a guy who wants to take you down. It's not going to threaten many submissions, but just wants to take you down, hold you there, and rinse and repeat takedowns if he has to. Solid cardio to do it. And I think it's a great fight. I think making Durden the favorite is what I would expect. He's currently minus 300 right now, which may be a bit wide, but I expect him to be the favorite, right? A very solid wrestler who can go out there and take down a guy in Schnell, hold him there, and Schnell has accepted bottom position before, but I think I'm going to go with Schnell here, a guy who has been fighting on a full camp, facing a guy who doesn't have the same power threat coming his way. I mean, against a guy like Ursag, yes, he was underdog because he had to watch out for that power. Durden's more of a wrestling threat, and on the mat, I do like Schnell's reversals. I like his grappling ability. I like his ability to threaten submissions as well, and I think he has minute-winning opportunities on the feet. I've seen Cody Durden hit and pieced up from the outside. I don't mind Matt Schnell as being able to threaten submissions on a guy in Durden who's been submitted before. So I'm taking the dog shot on Matt Schnell, a guy who has been preparing for a camp, a guy who has been in Vegas for a longer time. Durden just has a lot of obstacles to overcome, and I understand he has a wrestling path to victory. I do not blame anybody for playing him, but at such a wide price tag, give me a guy in Matt Schnell. Let's cheer for danger one last time here. I think he's a guy who could be dangerous in this spot, that's for sure, and at these odds we're getting, I think it's a bit disrespectful for a guy. DraftKings-wise, no salary yet for Durden. I think he could be viable at whatever price tag he is because he does have that wrestling upside. He has scored well before, but let's talk about Schnell. 6.7K, a guy who I just picked to win outright, a guy who will probably be popular, but so cheap. The cheapest fighter on the slate. Second cheap. I almost didn't count Marotte for a second, but the second cheapest fighter on a slate who I think has paths of victory, could potentially threaten submissions. A guy who I think wins more than the line and tails, and 6.7 against a new opponent here could bode pretty well. The guy's danger for a reason. I think he's got a ton of GP upside. At 6.7K, he opens a ton of possibilities up top. I like his price. I like the guy. I will be playing him. Cheering for Matt Schnell here on the full camp, and hopefully he's able to go out there and get it done. Shout out to Durden for taking the fight. I do not fault anybody for backing Durden here, but give me some Schnell. And we get to the 16-5-1 Kyle Nelson versus the 16-5 Steve Garcia. Let's go Canada. All right, let's put it out there. Kyle Nelson, we need it. We need a Canadian win. Shannon Clark last night got knocked out cold as a huge Canadian prospect. Let's give some Canadians something to cheer for here. Kyle, but he's got a tough matchup ahead. Steve Garcia is just the mean machine. He will go forward. He will look to break you. He does not care about what's coming his way. He will push forward and he'll look to take your head off. A ton of power, a ton of heart, a ton of resiliency, good boxing chops as well. And a guy who just, you don't want to be locked in there with. A guy who will win a lot of street fights because he will go forward. He kind of got that Trevor Peak mentality, but with way more technicality, way more power. Kyle Nelson, flip side of things, a guy who I've been harder on. I think out of all the Canadians, I owe Kyle Nelson an apology because I did not think the guy was that good, right? The guy doesn't have the most wrestling. The guy doesn't have the most volume. He's got a ton of power. His cardio wasn't that good. It's now improved. A guy who I think had a lot of flaws, but he's worked on that cardio. He's worked on that volume. He's won some minutes. He's landed powerful shots. I think he's a pretty good fighter. And the dynamic that interests me in this spot here is he has been working on that wrestling. He has been working on that power and that cardio as well. And though Steve Garcia is extremely dominant, extremely powerful, has brutalized opponents in there before, has been an underdog. We have seen him drop before, and I think Kyle Nelson has the power to touch a guy like Steve Garcia. So I think it's one of these spots here where I think maybe gun to my head, if I was forced to pick someone, if my life depended on it, probably pick Steve Garcia because I do think he has the ability to push forwards, break a guy like Kyle Nelson, but I think the line is wide. I think Nelson has power opportunities. I think he can find the counter here. I think he can mix in some takedowns as well. I think more times than not, Kyle Nelson exceeds the value on this line here. So I think it's a fun one. Potentially look towards an under, potentially look for a Nelson KO prop, but a very interesting spot here. I think I'm going to pick Nelson due to the odds. Potential Canadian bias here as well, but he has been making improvements. I just hope he can continue to do so and give us a good fight here. DraftKings wise, give me this fight though, all day. 8.6K Garcia's on a 4-fight KO win streak. A guy who's very fun to watch, will put up a very high score in doing so. And I do think he can melt a guy like Nelson. I love Steve Garcia, and he will be a very popular option. Flip side of things, you look at a guy in Nelson, 7.6K. He has gotten knockouts before. He is powerful. I don't mind sprinkling him in. I think it's going to be a high-paced, powerful affair, and I do think both guys have their paths to victory. I will be sprinkling both sides. I don't mind Nelson as an underdog because I do think he can clip Garcia, but willing to play both sides. Phenomenal DraftKings fight to target. Co-main event time. We have the 26-12 Jessica Andrade versus the 17-5-1 Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva has looked amazing so far in the UFC, and that's why she's such a big favorite against UFC vet here, Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade has been a bit up and down. She's kind of found her footing a bit recently, has shown that she still got it. Only 32 years old. Still has a bit of juice left in the tank, but a girl whose heart needs to be in it. When her heart's not in it, she's able to be taken down. She's able to be hit. She's been finished a couple spots as well. There's someone who can be beat, but when she's on top of her game, she's got a ton of physicality, a ton of power, really good cardio, really good volume, and is just extremely well-rounded to pose threats. And I think in this spot here, there's no doubt that the more technical striker is Natalia Silva. She has looked very good so far in the UFC, but she has fought at a lower level of competition. I think Jessica Andrade is a dangerous fighter, someone who has a ton of ability to go out there and still perform well at this point in her career. I think this line is wide, and I think it's one of those spots. I alluded to it earlier. Gun to my head, I probably pick Natalia Silva due to her technical striking and ability to win minutes here, but I don't want to bet against Andrade. I think Andrade still has some left in the tank. If her heart's in it, she potentially has wrestling upside. I think she has the ability to go out there and land a ton of volume. I think she's someone who will fight for your money, who will be a dog. So give me Natalia Silva to win as my official pick. But line is wide. If the line continues to climb, potentially a shot here on Andrade should be a fun one. DraftKings-wise, it kind of translates to that. I don't think Natalia Silva is really knocking out Andrade. So for that reason, I stay more away from Silva. I prefer other options in that top range. And I kind of want some Andrade down low. I think she wins this fight more than the line entails, and in doing so, has potential wrestling and volume to put up a very good score. It's such a good underdog price tag. We have a ton of underdogs to choose from this week, the more I look at it. But she's another one I'll look to sprinkle in there. Should be a fun fight. Picking Silva, but the line is way too wide in my opinion. And then the main event, the 22-7 Gilbert Burns versus the 16-1 Sean Brady. What a fun fight. And I'm looking forward to this one. I've been a big Sean Brady guy. I'm a fan of him. Phenomenal jiu-jitsu, phenomenal power, phenomenal strength and wrestling opportunities. You look good. I've betted him a lot. I even bet him against Bilal Muhammad. That was not the best look, but a guy who I do think has a very solid skill set. Phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner as well, which is funny because he's going up against one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in Gilbert Burns. A phenomenal fighter here. A guy who, yes, is 38 years old, but has done it all. Been at the top, fight for titles a couple times. Lost his last one too, but a guy who I do think has a very good overall skill set. He's worked on those hands, good hand speed, phenomenal power. He sat some guys down as well, and just a phenomenal ground game. Great jiu-jitsu, great wrestling. On a bit of a skid, but a very, very dangerous fighter. I understand Sean Brady being the favorite here. The younger fighter who has wrestling upside, I think, who can probably control a guy like Gilbert Burns. But I'm going to tell you right off the rip, I'm picking Gilbert Burns here. If his heart's in it, if he's in the right place, he has been 5 rounds. He has a level of experience. I have not seen Sean Brady do that well at this top level, but Gilbert Burns has. He's fought the best level of competition. He's gone 5 rounds. He's pushed through adversity. And If Sean Brady's not choking him out, does he have the ability to win 3 rounds or go 5 rounds against someone like Gilbert Burns here? I think it's a very tall task to ask. And before I play Sean Brady at chalk, give me a guy like Gilbert Burns, potentially look to give him a vet lesson here, introduce him to the 5 rounds, and potentially go out there and beat a more dangerous guy. If Brady's not finishing him on the mat, I don't think he has the power to do so on the feet. I think Burns could go out there and be a real threat for him for all 25 minutes. Although he's older, he's got the experience, he got the cardio, and I think he can go out there and really be a threat here. Give me Gilbert Burns as the underdog shot to end the card. DraftKings-wise, though, I want both sides. At their salaries, I think Sean Brady has takedown upside. I think he has control time upside. I think he has 5 rounds to work. A very good option up top. But I pick Gilbert Burns to win. I think he has some late finish equity. I think he himself has some sub-equity here. Gilbert Burns is a very underrated fighter, and I will have some of him at an underdog price tag. Phenomenal fight. I'm taking the dog shot here. 25 minutes to work, so both are live on DraftKings. Should be a fun one. That's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. And quickly running through my quick picks, taking Gilbert Burns, Natalia Silva, Kyle Nelson, Matt Schnell, Trevor Peak, Rongzhu, Ryan Spann, Isaac Dulgarian, Felipe Dos Santos, Gabriel Santos, Jacqueline Amorim, Andre Petroski, and Nathan Fletcher. DraftKings-wise, I like Spann up top. I like some Rongzhu sprinkled in there as well. I think that both sides of the main event are great to target. Both sides of the Steve Garcia versus Kyle Nelson fight are great to target, as well as the Fletcher versus Ramaska fight and Peak versus Ashmouz fight. Wow, I just nailed that for them. Let's say it one more time. Peak Ashmouz, Ramaska's Fletcher, main event, and Garcia Nelson. Those are 4 fights in the mid-range I really want to target. Aside from that, I like Schnell down low. If you can afford to get up to Dulgarian, I don't mind him up top either. I think Demopoulous and Andrade could be live underdogs as well. No rainmakers anymore. No bets locked in yet, but be sure to check me out on Twitter at CampbellsGore to see my full slate of bets. As I mentioned at the start of the video, check out CoolBet, check out Establish a Run, check out this channel here for some Dana White Contender Series content. Me and Liam hit it up every Monday night. My channel, his channel, check them both out. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I wish you all the best of luck in all your DraftKings and betting endeavors, guys, and let's make some money.